All right, everyone. We're back on. Jared and David here with the Twilla Happy Hour, and tonight we have David and Peter on with defend the defend the guard movement, or is it an organization? Explain to us a little bit about what it is.
Sure. So you got it right. It's kind of like both a movement, and then there's also a formal like nonprofit organization called Bring Our Troops Home. They're the ones that are behind pushing this legislation.
So, are you
But
guys going to buy mansions? When you're shopping for a mansion with your nonprofit, I'm just kidding. That's
That,
a
that's the wrong race,
that's
I
a
think.
different nonprofit that does that. But
Mhm.
go on.
Right. So, yeah, the organization is Bring Our Troops Home. I should make it clear, I'm not a part of the organization. I don't speak for them or represent them. So everything that I say is just for me and what we're doing here in Utah. But I work closely with those guys. In fact, they're the reason I found this. But Defend the Guard, in particular, is a movement that it's a decentralized approach to trying to rein in the overexpansion of our war powers. Well, the misabuse of the war powers and the overexpansion of our presence overseas by introducing state legislation into whatever respective state that would say we are not going to allow our National Guard troops be deployed into active duty combat until Congress, the U.S. Congress, has formally declared war. So that way, it pulls back on the constitutional war powers, which were part of how this country was founded, and it's supposed to bring more accountability and just make sure that we're not getting roped into more, endless wars and conflicts that really don't have a whole lot of benefit or value to our country. Just other operations that we tend to get roped into.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But this defend the guard will not include reservists, correct?
oh, sorry, Pete, you were gonna say?
That's correct. There's three components of the Army and of the Air Force: the active duty, reserve, and National Guard. This bill is only for the National Guard because they have a different mandate than active duty and reservists
Yeah,
do.
Army Reserve, they fall under the federal government.
Yes, they do.
National Guard is state militia.
Exactly.
I like it. What you would be doing is well, the War Powers Act came out of, correct me if I'm wrong, 1973,
That's right.
and they came out under Nixon, and they were an egregious trampling of the Constitution, because the Constitution wanted to have the different states carry a voice in whether we commit our young men at the time to go into a foreign land and spilling their blood. And I think it's one of the small steps that should be taken to wrestle that back, because it's a lot easier for me to get a hold of my congressman than it is to get a hold of the president, or God forbid the Joint Chiefs or any of them.
And
Yeah.
just to clarify things for our audience, the federal powers that be have authority to command active duty troops and 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year reservists. The governor of a state has authority to command guardsmen. So think of the National Guard and the Air National Guard as kind of like your state mafia. Now,
State militia.
militia, right,
State
right.
mafia.
That's what he said, right?
I guess it depends on how we want to use them.
And your federal troops would be the active duty and reservists. And recently, I would say the military has really leaned heavy on support from the Guard. I know I did 22 years of service, and I did not have a hard time finding a deployment if I wanted to go overseas. And I think we were cheaper to utilize as well because active duty people, there's a lot of expense with active duty orders versus just deploying some guardsmen. So this kind of hurts the pocketbook of the nation too, and kind of forces their hand a little bit. And I think it's a pretty decent strategic move. And I'm curious, are we the only state putting forth a Defend the Guard law, or is this not something that's unique to just Utah?
This is not unique to Utah. The modern Defend the Guard bill, I'm not sure if there's before this, but I think it was 2014, was in West Virginia. A delegate named Pat McGeehan, former Army intelligence veteran, put forth Defend the Guard in West Virginia. Hasn't passed yet. He's run it every year since. And we can get into more about why it hasn't
decentralized
passed.
Approach to trying to rein in the overexpansion of our war powers. Well, the misabuse of the war powers and the overexpansion of our presence overseas by introducing the overexpansion of our war powers. Well, the misabuse of the war powers and the overexpansion of our presence overseas by introducing the overexpansion of our war powers. Well, the misabuse of the war powers and the overexpansion of our presence overseas.
Technical problem.
By introducing the
Technical problem.
Yeah.
I was saying, I hear myself, but I am not talking.
Oh my goodness.
And we're still live though.
Yeah, we're still live.
Okay.
Hold on. We got a comment coming. Katie, is the sound cutting out constantly, or is it just the guest or everyone? I'll ask it separate. Go ahead and keep carrying on.
Tell us more.
Okay. Yeah. So West Virginia was kind of where it started. And it has really picked up steam the last year or two. It was actually introduced in Utah first in 2020. Representative Mark Roberts, he's no longer in the legislature, but he ran the bill. And it was more just testing the waters to see what kind of reception it would have. And so we're excited to get it running again here in Utah. There's some other states that have talked about it. I think Florida is close to passing it. Hopefully, Kansas is pretty active in pushing it forward. David, do you remember how many states have filed?
I know that they have mentioned that there's over, and I apologize, I've been so wrapped up with other things that I've got a bunch of different numbers and different things mixed up in my head. So I'm trying to get all the numbers and
let's just say it's a multiple angled bill that's going into many different states.
Yeah, I think you could say, I think they've said there's over 30 plus states have a form of the bill being worked on and introduced. Not all of them have been introduced, but there are people on the ground working to get some model legislation formed and get it introduced and filed. So it's not just a handful that it's working on. There's at least over half of the country, some sort of movement is going on with it. And I apologize for not having more specific details. But yeah, it's definitely becoming more of an issue at the forefront each year, I would say.
I would ask this on our state government, who's most receptive currently to this idea, and who's opposed?
I think the opposition is what we know more than the actual those that support it. Representative Roberts no longer in the legislature. He was more of a libertarian leaning representative, and without him, it's kind of been hard to find some actual supporters. There's two members of the state house that are former guardsmen. Representative Val Peterson retired as a colonel from the Guard, and Representative Jeff Burton was the adjutant general for the state of Utah for the National Guard, a two-star general. He was as big as it gets for the National Guard in Utah. And then after he retired, he ran for the state house. We know that they're good, solid legislators that will have a lot of input. And the rest of the legislature will look to them for bills concerning the National Guard, since most of them don't have experience with it. We kind of think that they will not be in favor of this bill. When Representative Roberts ran it before, Representative Peterson expressed the sentiment that he liked the bill, or he liked the idea behind the bill. He liked holding Congress accountable. The states are an additional check on the federal government, but he didn't like it. He saw it as holding the Guard hostage in order to pass policy. And so I don't know if his view has changed since then. Hopefully it has. But I think we've got some good, strong counter arguments to those concerns.
So he said it was like holding the Guard hostage.
So a lot of times, especially in that West Virginia bill, I think that's a good example that when they went to committee, the Pentagon showed up at the committee to say, if you pass this bill, we will withhold funding to your National Guard. And so that means loss of jobs, that means loss of missions for the Guard, loss of training opportunities. And that's a legitimate threat. Like that is a real thing that they can hold over us.
Because the federal government supplies a lot of money to the Guard system.
Oh yeah, if I remember right, I did my homework a little bit a few months ago. So some of the grants from the DoD or the Department of Defense in Utah, I'm pretty sure that the National Guard is like the number one recipient, at least according to the report that they put out. It was for 2018, I think. I could be wrong, but they were up there, if not the top, for the number one recipient next to the University of Utah and BYU and some other institutions. But yeah, like Pete said, we haven't really had the chance to work closely with any specific legislators. I haven't had the chance to hear personally from. I haven't heard from Val Peterson or Jeff Burton myself as their opinions, but I have heard mention, like Pete said, of that they don't disagree or dislike the bill outright, like the spirit of it, but they're more, they don't like the approach or they disagree with the approach. I have worked with one specific representative. I don't want to give out this person's name just because I was working with them right before the session started, and then the session happened. And so I've got to get back in touch with this person to make sure that they're still on board. But I've got one legislator that expressed some good support for it, was anxious, and actually had a really good connection with Jeff Burton. So, this person had Jeff's ear ready. So when we wanted to talk to him and try to go through what the options are for this bill, they were ready. I have a couple other legislators that I'm trying to target that I think would be really good. But I want to withhold dropping names at the moment live, just for purposes of, I don't want to poison the well before I even get a chance to meet with them. But yeah, there's every state that has introduced this has found significant opposition in that, the Guard from there, or the military from that state, will send in like their top general, a 2-star general, to go testify against the bill and express their concerns, which, like we mentioned, our money is a huge one. However, I'm trying to remember which state it was. I had Dan McKnight is the founder of Bring Our Troops Home. So he's the guy he's a 13-year military veteran. He's the huge voice and powerhouse behind this bill going to all the states. And he's been my point of contact. So he said that one of the recent committees that actually, because this bill has been introduced in a few committees, and you can actually go listen to the hearings on YouTube. And he was saying in one of them, they actually got a fiscal note, I believe, back, and the fiscal note showed that there was zero cost to this bill. So it's not going to cost anything. The only concern is, how will the federal government react? But the way I see it is that it's true. There is a real concern of how they might shift funding or what they might do. But on the flip side, what is the main purpose of the National Guard? It is to defend and address any emergencies within our borders.
Within
if they take away money,
within the state's borders.
Yeah, within the state's borders.
Not just ours, but within the National Guard is the proffer of the governor. And so it's within the state's borders. So the National Guard responds to natural disasters, things like that.
Right.
And then, of course, they could be requested from other states to be bolstered. And that's been offered, and many things like that. But yeah.
Exactly. And so Utah, they have relied on Utah Like, for example, however you may feel, I'm not trying to bring up like the opinions of it, but on January 6th, they did use Utah National Guard troops to go over to Washington, D.C. Um, and there's been countless scenarios, like you mentioned. But if they pull funding from any National Guard base because of this, that is automatically shooting themselves in the foot. Because when they want to use those Guard members for any emergencies, or allow them to actually do their job, they're literally kneecapping them from doing the primary thing that they need to do, just out of spite, which would seem like a counterintuitive thing to do. I mean, wouldn't put it past them to do it, but that is it's a double-edged sword, I would say.
Yeah,
And I think
because you're asking people to put the Constitution over money, and we already know where that stands with the
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think my personal opinion on the Constitution, it's the equivalent of a gun-free zone sign, right? That doesn't really stop government.
I like
But I
it.
kind of hope that I don't think that defend the guard is a silver bullet in fixing America's overseas adventures. I hope I've already thought of ways that they can get around it, which I'm sure they will. But it's something that can help slow the tide. That the states are supposed to be a check, and this is one way that the states can assert themselves. And the beauty of this is that threat of withholding funding. When this bill is passed, across the country, all these states, then that threat becomes obsolete. They can't withhold funding from all of us because they need all of us.
Yeah, it's a
One
great
state
litmus
isn't going to make a
test.
difference, but all of them will.
Yeah, it's a great litmus test for states that want to be virtuous towards the Constitution, and those that are just full of crap. And I don't mean to knock the Guard. I mean, I did 22 years in it, but we're basically a bunch of mercenaries. We can't get decent jobs on the outside, and we want we want active duty orders, and we'll go do what we got to do to get them. So, sadly, that's the state of the Guard. I mean, it might as well just be the reserves, to be honest with you.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The role of the Guard has changed over the years. It definitely started out as a state militia, but if you look at, and the kind of people look at it nowadays, and they don't really see a difference between the Guard and active duty, especially on deployments. But over the course of the last 100 years or so, you see how the federal government has inserted itself into the Guard to make all the training, all the missions the same. And I think you can make good arguments for those things. But even up until like the 70s through Vietnam, the Guard was mostly a supportive role. They did see combat. There were combat units of the Guard, but especially in the War on Terror, the Guard is almost synonymous with active duty. 45% of all guardsmen of all military members that deployed in the War on Terror were guardsmen.
Yeah, and they loved.
We could not fight the wars without the Guard.
They loved deploying them because it gave their balance sheets a good look.
It's the disposable of the disposable.
Well, no, it's
yeah. They're the
no,
cheaper.
no.
They're the
No,
cheaper soldiers.
let me break that down. When they have to show their uppers, their balance sheet of how many of their soldiers are in transition to and from, the Guard doesn't count on the balance sheet. So it's free personnel over there that the civilian states or the civilian class has to put its life on hold, their jobs, their life, their wives, and their active duty class. It doesn't affect their balance sheet, doesn't throw them into the red, and they get to bolster forces. How many guardsmen have we lost in Utah in the last 20 years in overseas ventures?
I actually pulled up a bunch of. Sorry, what were you going to say, Pete?
I don't have a number on that. I don't know.
I did some digging again not too long ago, and I found numbers on total deaths just throughout the military through the states on different wars, and I wanted to focus in on that, on how many Guards members have died and how many Guards members from Utah. And I don't think we have had more than a handful.
I know of
Guards members that have died.
I know of 3.
Okay.
I know of 3, 1 officer, 2 enlisted in the National Guard, and then that's what I know of our National Guard that went over. And yeah,
Right.
like you said, the National Guard used to pull a supportive role, but that's not the case anymore. Utah's National Guard is artillery. And that's not a support role. It's a indirect fire support role. You know, and if you're in California, New York, their National Guard is infantry.
You don't want artillery in Salt Lake City. I mean, what would they do? I don't even know.
Well, each state kind of has a specialty. Idaho runs
I
armor. And I think that's just to simplify so the state doesn't have to manage mixed combat brigades, which I'm sure are logistically nightmares. But
and me personally, I don't think there's anything wrong with the guardsmen going overseas to do battle and you know, sling their skills. But I would love to see Congress have the authority to wage war and not the president.
Well, me personally, I do. I think if a young man wants to go overseas and sling their skills, they should join the Army or the Marines or the Navy or X, Y, and Z. I think we should separate the Guard and say the Guard is that last line of defense, and they're kept here and we can hone their training for here. And then they're not used as a hostage. Like every time the federal government wants to raise the budget, they use the national parks as a hostage. Well, in this case, it sounds like they use the National Guard as a hostage.
Right. And I might just add one thing. I would be remiss if I did not, talking about people who Guards members from Utah that died. There is a significant one. Not that anyone's more important than each other, but we did lose a mayor in North Ogden.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of the his name escapes me again. I can't believe I'm not
he was
remembering all these things.
He was major. He was a major, wasn't he? Yeah.
And he was killed in an insider attack while they were training the Afghan soldiers that ended up not doing a goddamn thing when we pulled out. So it was an insider attack that they admitted could have been prevented. And so it really is, the question is this worth it? Like, are our lives, our civilians, you know, are their lives and their families worth sacrificing because we are getting involved in endless conflicts that are questionable from the get-go, right? I mean, we could debate why we went to Afghanistan. We could debate about all the countless conflicts. Why are we sending 1,000 troops to Africa, the Horn of Africa, at the end of last year? Why are we sending, you know, I think they said under 500 to Somalia, just barely. And then they toyed with the idea of sending countless more to not Ukraine, but the Eastern Front over there to, you know, address whatever possible conflict. And so it's like you said, it's not that I'm saying there's no role for the Guard to fight, but we should at least have a conversation about this. Especially because when I talk to my friends who are in the Guard, here in Utah, I have made several friends, and I have some old friends. And every time I've talked to them about this, at first when I introduced Defend the Guard, they were excited. They said that this is super important. They felt like this was, you know, relevant in that there is a problem with how the Guard is used. And then when the Ukraine issue broke out between Russia and Ukraine, I asked them, like, what are your thoughts? And they said, I don't want to go over there and die over that conflict. Like, there's no reason for me to go over there. And so to hear from the actual people whose lives are on the lines, that matters. And having the current system of where the president and the executive branch can just send them off whenever they want, and then our quote unquote representatives in Congress don't have to be held accountable, especially when they don't have anything to lose in this. More of them probably have stuff to gain financially. And so if we could at least have this conversation, you know, like Pete was mentioning, it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to cure everything, but it's a step in the right direction. And for me, I've learned over the past couple of years, you know, we love to talk about how much we love our troops, especially here in Utah. We love to say we support our troops. You know, they're our heroes and they're the best. But what are we doing if we're not listening to those who are saying, hey, there's been a problem. My life has been ruined by this. I've been deeply affected by this. I disagree with how things are being managed. This is a serious way for regular people like myself, who doesn't have military experience, to actually show that I give a damn and I'm listening to these people rather than just saying, hey, thank you for your service. Oh, we have another war. All right, that let's send our boys on over, and then thank you for your service, or well, thank you for serving even though it cost you your life. It's a shift in the mindset, I think, of how we approach this issue and what we can do for the men and women that actually put their lives on the line.
People don't question, they support the troops, but they don't question the politicians that send the troops to war. They just give a blank check to the politicians and say, we support the troops, and I don't see how those ideas can fit together. I'm a veteran. This bill means a lot to me. I see how. I think the example of Afghanistan last summer, I think to most people, is a clear example of why this bill is important. And not to armchair quarterback that, the withdrawal. I do think the withdrawal was a good thing, maybe botched in its execution.
Hold on. Are you seriously saying that leaving in the middle of the night and leaving our allies over there shocked and surprised was a botched execution?
I mean, I think someone could have done that a little bit better. I just think, but the fact that no one has been held responsible for mistakes that happen, I don't know how to hold those people accountable. I don't know how to say, Secretary Austin, you have blood on your hands. Yep. General Milley, you have blood on your hands. You messed up.
Well, I mean, it was more important to understand white rage at the time. So,
if you got priorities,
yeah.
Well, speaking of that, it is nearing St. George's second year anniversary, and just want to pay a little homage.
Yeah, St. George. But no, seriously. But anyways, I've got the Defend the Guard website up on the screen for people watching right now.
And for the audience, just so you know, the original plan of the Constitution was to allow Congress to wage war, to declare war, not the president. And currently, the president can not even have to bother to ask for that permission. Well, he can just send troops wherever he wants. And this bill will not stop him from having access to troops. Again, please know that he will still be able to send troops. But if you're in the Guard, at least you can have the privilege of saying, I still serve under the Constitution. And and that to me, I mean, being in the Guard was always like, okay, at least I'm a state militia, so it's more local level, and that was always like a prideful thing for me because I didn't want to take the reserve or the active duty commissions there. I would rather serve the states, and this would be able to let people like myself who actually give a damn about the Constitution and their oath to protect the Constitution. It helps us mentally fortify our soul, because I totally agree with your mission, and I can definitely recommend that you should talk to our representative, Dan Thatcher, and say that Dave Weiss sent you. But the part of your mission is to get out there and talk to these state representatives, and I know it isn't always easy, but man, you got to cold call these guys sometimes.
Oh yeah. No, I've been working on it.
Well, it's more. This is what better way to grassroots reining the government in. Our government's out of hand. They're running us straight off a cliff, and I don't see a better way. Gain control of this one little thing where it's clearly defined in the Constitution, where neither side, no matter what color glasses they want to put on, can read it and say, oh, it doesn't say that. It clearly says it in the Constitution that Congress carries the declaration of war powers. And you start reining them in there, and Yeah, yeah, they'll still send our boys off, and it'll say police action, or we send them over there for whatever other reason. But it's a start. It's something that we
Yeah.
can start. And I mean, yes, it would be nice if we put all our politicians on trial and said, you know, show me your voting record. Were you there when you voted on this? Did you read it before you voted on it? You know, things like that. But we won't get that yet. So let's grab what we can. And this is just essentially this bill you're putting forward could just say follow the Constitution. You could slide it across the desk because that's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
And did the general for Utah go and testify against the bill?
No.
It hasn't been introduced into committee. I think when Mark did it, he had introduced the bill or filed it, but I don't think it made it before a committee.
Yeah, I don't think it made it out of Rules Committee. It just hasn't made it that far. I think we filed it again this year. I think, but it didn't make it to Rules Committee. It didn't get.
I don't even know that it got filed, honestly. When I tried looking it up and I couldn't find anything, but it was supposed to be. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's this grassroots movement. When we talk to people about this, people are like, well, that's logical. That makes sense. Yeah, I'm behind it. And I think that's true of any political persuasion. This is bipartisan as you can get. That if you're a MAGA, America First type, this is your bill. If you're, I think America should stop killing brown people indiscriminately overseas, this is your bill. If you're in the environment is your big issue, like the military is the biggest polluter, like this might limit some of that, like get behind this bill. And I think this is grassroots, that if we can show that there's enough support from everyday people, and we go to the legislature and they say, hey, we've got all this support, like it's a no-brainer. I think that should overcome any opposition there is on the Hill.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and the military is the biggest polluter.
And again, you're saying it should overcome the opposition, but that's only if people really want to put the Constitution over the money that the federal government can give you. And that is a big argument. Right now, we're letting our kids turn into we're so willing to embrace the federal income that we're getting from the federal government that we would actually,
you mean that
we'd let our kids become trannies,
that they're giving back
rather than not take the money.
We're not getting money from the federal government. The federal government is giving some of what they,
They're returning it so kindly back to us.
Some of what they levied back.
The rabbit in the hat trick. They're pulling money. They're giving it to this organization that educates our kids. And all they have to do is just educate our kids and turn them into trannies, and we get that extra money. And the parents are okay with it. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you're facing an uphill battle. I mean, you're talking to a society that would rather let their children endure this rather than sacrifice money.
And I think one thing, though, that we have the advantage of is you don't necessarily have to have a majority of a massive group of people like voicing this and trying to get the legislature's attention. It's more powerful if, for example, what if, and I honestly don't think she would probably line up 100% with this. I don't know. That's my own intuition. But the wife of that mayor who was killed, could you imagine if I sat down with a representative and say, hey, this wife is in your district and her husband was killed because of these stupid actions overseas and these blundering missions that we've been doing. She doesn't have a husband anymore. That city of North Ogden doesn't have their leader anymore. And more importantly, this man's kids are fatherless. So what are you going to do, representative, to help that? Can you work with us on this bill? And if we get enough of those people, those stories, and they still come out and say no, they're saying no to a bunch of military veterans, families, people who actually it would be very cringeworthy to see on the news your representative or your senator saying, yeah, I didn't want to pass this bill, even though I've talked with family members and former service members because I was worried about money. I mean, I have my friend Diego he's part of the Bring Our Troops Home movement. He gave a testimony, or he testified in court, or not court, in one of the committees, and was saying, they were bringing up the question of money. He said, "Sir, my friend came home in a box, and you want to talk to me about money." So I think more than trying to get a majority and a lot of people, to shift their focus away from maybe the issues of, the transgender sports or whatever cultural, thing is going on right now, if we can at least target and get the demographic that really this affects, I think they're going to be more powerful than if I show up with I think a handful of you guys who have experience in the military would outweigh 1,000-fold 100 me's who are just activists. I think that's where the real weight of this bill lies, is if we can find people just who are affected by it, rather than let's just make it the cultural issue of the day.
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily an angle that would change depending upon who declared the war, if it was Congress or the president. I mean, when we sign up to go to service, we hope we don't come back in a box, but I mean, we are the disposable male force of our military arm, and that is part of the job. But as a soldier, I do want to be able to make the commitment that I spew off from my orifice as like this oath to the Constitution. And part of that is Congress having the authority to declare war, not the president. So
yes,
from my angle, it's like, okay, I might die, I might not. That's just part of the game. But at least let's play by the rules and follow the rules that were set forth by our founding fathers. And that's the reason why we want to join the military, is to protect those rules. So, don't tarnish my death by circumventing this Constitution. I mean, what a way to rest a soul by letting us get sent over into a war that hasn't even been declared. And, that's, we break our oaths by having to die that way.
That's how I feel. And I take that oath that I took to the Constitution seriously, and knowing full well I could die. I deployed as a mechanic, as an aircraft mechanic, so I'm definitely not a combat vet, not in danger really in any way. But I took the same oath. And Congress hasn't declared war since 1942.
Yeah. That's something to take into perspective. And funny, prior to that, it was called the Department of War.
That sounds pretty sexy.
And then they call it the Department of Defense, and they never declare war again. And they never have to, aside from a couple of marches in Vietnam, during Vietnam and, Ohio and that, they never got deployed, in wartime. They never got deployed to defend us. It was always deployed in aggression under the Department of Defense.
The best defense is a good offense, Jared.
You see what I'm saying?
Grade A propaganda for you.
It's pretty wild when you think about it. It's almost like it was planned. I think it was Forrestal was our first Secretary of Defense. Yeah, ended up jumping out of a window at an insane asylum. But anyways, no, I like it. We do need ground roots movements we've got to wrestle control of our nation back from these politicians. We know the politicians, it's coming out now. They're all invested in, the big money making outfits. And how many of those money making outfits say Raytheon and Boeing and General Electric and all that? And so of course they're going to vote for war. And there's maybe a handful of them that are not on that train, but everyone else is going to vote for war. It's just going to make their investment portfolios swell. It's going to make it so that when they rerun for election, that their war coffers fill up. We got to beat them at that.
So let me ask you this: what are your methods to get support for this bill with the population? do you guys actually do any like petitioning, or do you go to your city council meetings or your county council meetings and say, hey, check this out, this is what we're doing?
We've been pretty new at this. We've only been really active on this for a couple months now. And so all of those are like planned, that we like any method that we can, whether it's these podcasts that we've done. I've appeared in some Rotary Club meetings, but anywhere that people will listen to us.
For anyone born after 1942, explain to them what a Rotary Club is.
It's just a local group that performs service for their community, kind of a service oriented.
I've talked about Rotary Clubs many times on this show.
Yeah. Is my sister's Rotary Club, so I'm not even really sure. She just invited me on, and I got to talk to them, and it was a great discussion of, and it was mostly older folks, but they had great insight and very supportive of this bill. We're trying to do a lot of work on social media, just to get word out and say, if you want to get behind this bill, like this is your source for information, and then we can go to the Capitol and show our support.
Yeah, and I might add, what I've been doing is because I reached out to the Bring Our Troops Home organization about a year ago, or maybe it was in 2020. I can't remember if it was in 20 or 21. But I reached out to them and said, hey, I saw there's no one doing work in Utah. I'd love to help out. And so I've been trying to, I'm new to all of this kind of like activist, legislator process, like all that stuff is new to me. So it's been a whole learning curve. But the main approach I've been doing is I figured I'm going to try to find members of either, the current guard, active duty, veterans, families. Those are my targets of people I want to talk to. So that way, when I try to get a hold of a representative, I can tell them, say, hey, I'm working with someone in your district or your area. I have someone that is deeply affected by the military, and you seem to be interested in the military. Because that's, for me, I think I'll have more success trying to show up at their doorstep with some friends of mine who actually have skin in the game versus just myself. I've gone to a couple, local political gatherings. What else? Oh, this is an interesting one. This one I didn't even intend on, but I was driving home from Salt Lake and I got a phone call it was just like a generated phone call from one of Mike Lee's teletown halls or something like that. And so I was like, oh, I'll sit in and listen to this. And I listened to his little like 15-minute spiel. And then it was like, all right, we're opening up the phone lines to the audience. Whoever wants to call in and ask Mike a question live on air, go ahead and dial this number. So I figured, well, I still got a drive ahead of me. I got time. So I called, and I was the second to last question on air. And so I asked him right there, I said, hey, you seem to be one of the only guys up in Congress who really cares about stopping these wars. So what are your thoughts on Defend the Guard, if you are aware of it? And then I kind of gave an explanation, like very brief, because I only had like a minute or 2 minutes. And so I just basically put him on the spot and said, what do you think? Do you support it? Would you support it? And he, on air, he said he didn't recognize the organization. He wasn't familiar with the organization, but he likes the spirit of the bill and he supports the idea, and it's something worth looking into. And that, he'd be interested to see some of those questions about, what's the legality of maybe certain parts of, can the governor just outright say no to the president, stuff like that. So I got Mike Lee to on air say he was receptive to the idea. But the approach right now is mostly try to target specific people that might have a connection to a legislature or someone who has a role that's influential enough that it would look bad for a representative or a senator just to ignore that petition.
That's a good idea. And find some of the yellow ribbon mothers, talk to them. Granted, I understand when you're in the military, getting deployed over the seas into a combat zone is it's a point of pride. It really is. You know, we all know that it sucks while you're there, but when you get back, it's usually a point of pride and things like that. But I think that a more important thing would be to refrain back to where Congress has to declare war and we don't deploy men and women to foreign lands to get involved in altercations with other countries without a declaration of war, or at least a declaration of intent. You know?
Right.
I think it's interesting talking, since I work with veterans, and I don't know what your experience was like, but I think most, they're not following current events. We just get sent where we get sent.
Most of them are young.
It's a paycheck. And so when a service member or a guard member is saying, hey, I don't think we should be going here, I think they're actively speaking against their own interests financially. And so I think their word on that is worth taking into account, that if they say, hey, I'd rather turn down this money and uphold my oath to the Constitution, I think that's significant. And so we're looking for more veterans that feel that way.
It is, but on average, your average veteran, until they're, Army side, until they're at least E5P, maybe E6, or even aware of what the Constitution is, because it's not taught in school anymore. But how could they teach it? Because they wrote a book of laws that makes any, encyclopedia blush with its size.
I enlisted kind of later. I was 22 when I enlisted, and so I've always liked history, so I kind of was aware that we hadn't declared war for a long time, and I knew what the Constitution said, but I'm like, oh, I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure that the legalness of all this has been sorted out, and who am I to question that? But you really start to look into it, and it's like, what have we been doing? And there's no legality backing for most of it.
Yeah. Funny. And since we quit declaring war, we quit winning wars.
That's really interesting.
It's
almost like winning's not the objective.
Except for Desert Storm, which Desert Storm was kind of an internationally declared war. But since we quit declaring war, we went to Vietnam. That went well. And then on Panama and Honduras, Grenada.
What does Russia call it? It's a military intervention, or what? He's got
right now. I think on the Russian side, they're calling it a humanitarian mission.
Humanitarian mission.
Yeah.
They're kind of taking a play out of our playbook in this, it's just a police action that we're going to intervene.
Yeah. And they've kind of got a point, because for the last 8 years in the eastern side of the Ukraine, there has been some atrocities happening, so hey, I don't know.
You know what? At least there's one pretty significant thing that Putin has accomplished in all of this. And I don't know if you guys saw just the other day, if it was yesterday or something, but he got George Bush to slip up and admit that he is guilty of the exact same thing in Iraq. That was probably one of the most incredible blunders I've ever seen.
I watched that live on stage. He says, oh, you can't just illegally invade Iraq. I mean Ukraine. And then he giggles, and I'm like,
and the whole room starts laughing.
You're like, that's because they're there amongst friends. He's there amongst people who benefited from invading Iraq and Afghanistan and wherever else he went.
Yeah, it's like Pete said. It's a rule out of our own playbook. George Bush can't even distinguish himself from Putin.
I know.
Well, here's the thing, though. In Ukraine, the people liked the president. In Iraq, they didn't.
I would say just as many disliked as liked in both places. Just as many in both sides.
There's a lot of factional things going on.
There's
Eastern Ukraine, Western Ukraine, and that's a whole I would suggest going and listening to Scott Horton talk about
Yep.
that. He's got a 2 hour speech on that whole thing, and
I've
Iraq
tried-
was a
I've tried turning
similar.
Dave on to Scott Horton before. He hasn't caught on yet. I've tried turning him on to Scott Horton and Martyr Maid, and he's just
Is that the guy you sent me that podcast?
That
on,
was
and they said he was a
Martyr
little
Maid.
whiny.
yeah. But
Mermaid.
both of them, they lay it out. They lay a clear lineage of what happened, and those are Scott Horton is one of the best to go to because he gets the right info. But yeah, no, Ukraine has been in a civil war, straight up civil war.
Oh yeah, I know. I remember.
So then, how can you say that they like their president more than Iraq did?
Well, I don't know. It worked out good for Abraham Lincoln. I mean, civil wars.
I don't know. I think he, went to a theater in celebration and didn't work out so good.
Well, he's on a penny.
Yeah.
I
It's not
mean,
good for his legacy.
Yeah.
if you're going to get a legacy,
But
Yeah,
On
anyway,
the penny. Yep.
but I think this is a good move, really, at least to draw attention to it.
Yeah.
I
I hope people are talking about why. I mean, I still have friends that don't understand why we went to Iraq and don't understand that it was 100% based on lies.
hell,
and there was
there's
no reason to do that.
there's probably a 100,000 lower enlisted that don't know at all, that never really heard the story, because we went there before they were born.
Yep.
They were born and raised and then deployed into a war that was started before they were seamen, and they fought in that war. That's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same war that their father was fighting in, potentially. There's stories of that, right?
Yeah.
Fathers and sons fighting in the same war.
Yeah.
Was there an incident like that in Rome where it was just generation after generation?
Oh,
you can think of?
sure. Yeah.
I mean, we can't be the only country to experience that.
Well, I mean, they marched on Carthage twice, so maybe. I don't know.
I don't know if they had the ability to wage
But
20 years of war.
their wars wars like that, Rome would have said, okay, we're going to wage a war for a season, and then we've got to take 3 seasons off to rebuild and then go back.
And yeah.
I mean, heck, it took Hannibal after he left North Africa, it took him something like 8 years before he actually crossed the Alps.
Yeah.
And he stopped in Spain, started a few mines. Yeah, wars in those days were a little different. I mean, nowadays we could put boots anywhere on the ground in the world within 24 hours. It's unheard of
for generations.
But
I think we need to talk about the negative effects of endless wars. That I don't know if people realize, like, I think, the government pays for these wars by inflating our currency. Like that.
Hold on. You're speaking crazy. Go on.
But it's like, that's so obvious to me, but I think people don't realize that it's been for 20 years that we've been fighting this endless nonsense, $30 trillion in debt. That's a huge, significant impact that is, like, probably on the news the most today. But you can go to, like, the surveillance state that we know the government's spying on all of us. All of the, the culture war stuff is all because of the expanded federal government in the name of these wars that were started 20 years ago.
I just think
a net loss for us.
I think on Friday nights at the CIA and the NSA, they play Let's Spy on Who's Touching Themselves roulette. And they just get it playing and hit end and see if it's something gross or good to look at. And it's just regular people going about their business legitimately and honestly. But, we had some bills signed in because of these wars that allow them to, reach into our pockets, spy on us. bolster up media companies to disenfranchise us of the nation that they rob us to pay for. It's a lot when you think about it.
Yeah.
It's that, and that's where we are. I can't imagine, and this pisses everyone off every time I say it, but I can't imagine the state has much longer left at the way it's going. With the debt.
No, it definitely feels like we're on a suicide mission. That's for sure.
Yeah. With the debt, with the corruption in government, with the ABC agencies. I mean, right now, I've been reading up on, this is the thing that gets me. The ATF is all of a sudden rewriting laws. I didn't know the ATF was a legislative branch of the government, but the ATF rewrites laws as they want.
Hey man, you saw what they did to people they don't like. You saw Waco. It ain't nothing going to stop them. If they want something to happen, they'll make it happen.
Oh yeah. So. And that was just the ATF was on the chopping block to lose 30% of its next year's funding. So they said, all right, 30% will burn 54 people and 32 kids. If I remember, that was the numbers, and burned them alive.
People are cultists. Which one is it?
People.
There were people?
Yeah, they were people.
Because I thought they said they were cultists.
Oh, the people who burned them alive told you they were cultists? Okay. Go on.
I mean, I'd say the people that burned them were probably just as arguably a cult as the other guys.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether they were a cult or not, being burned alive is...
Burning kids alive, even if they're cultist children.
There were only, I think, 6 babies in there under 8 months of age. So, I mean, it's sacrifice to Moloch. We can all live with it. Let's go on.
Yeah.
Heresy must be purged.
Hey, and then we still get the ATF. But anyways, we got about 6 minutes left, so I want to go through the comments we got on here, and then okay, the comments went. Where are we at here?
That's them right there.
I know, but it seemed like they come in goofy on this one. Anyways, okay. Freudian slip. I think your next topic should have teachers on to tell us how exactly they're turning our children into trannies.
Didn't we already do that?
Yeah. Well, maybe we should. Why? It seems like a lot of the comments jumped off because there was a lot more earlier. Oh, and then someone asked, yeah, there are older comments and it's not showing them. Let's go over here. All right. Okay, we had some sound problems in the beginning. Okay, someone says currently Texas Governor Greg Abbott has sent thousands of the National Guard to the U.S.-Mexican border in an operation called Operation Lone Star. Would defend the Guard prevent this? And then Dave answered her, said the Guard belongs to the governor. The Guard is under the governor's purview, and, that's how it goes. They were deployed in Texas. Now, some Texas National or some Florida National Guard went to Texas. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm.
But that was upon request and that was a volunteer action.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can briefly...
specifically for combat missions overseas.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, so it won't change the ability to shift them within the states. Its priority is to make sure that they don't leave the states. So when there's a natural disaster in Utah, and Utah's Guard is already overseas fighting the stupid war over there, we don't have to call Texas or Kansas to borrow their National Guard, because that's been a case too where the Guard isn't even there to actually help with their job because they've been deployed somewhere else.
Or even if there's a national disaster in Colorado and Colorado could use some help from Utah.
Yeah.
And also they're not getting shot at. That's kind of a big difference.
Big one. That's
a huge one.
I don't know if that's true on the Texas border, but that's just part of the job. Let's admit it.
Yeah. Okay. You're
at least getting shot by fellow Americans, not terrorists overseas. That's the difference.
Makes a big difference if the bullets have
sombreros or not.
Have American intent. But there's a big problem. The border is an issue. It's a complicated issue. It's an issue that divides. Katie sits on the left side of the fence, and we sit on this one. We sit more on the right, so that's something we won't see eye to eye on. But it is still, I think, deploying National Guard within your state to deal with an issue that is being exacerbated or neglected by the federal government for politics. I still think, even if you're doing it on the state level for politics, is I still think is better than sending them to an open, undeclared war zone.
Yep.
Yeah. And I like what you're doing. I would love to see something like this go further. Again, I mean, my mind the whole time is just tracking back to what caused this, making the senators elected by popular vote. That's one thing where you took away any voice or strength of the state when you did that. And so if we ditched the popular vote and went back to your federal senators were elected by your state senators from the state Senate, then that gives the state some more strength. And that slips both ways. I'm sure when for those of you on the left, I'm sure when, let's say year 6 of Iraq, when California's getting tired of it, let's remember California sent a lot of National Guard to Iraq, and those National Guardsmen were infantry, and those infantry got bloody. They lost quite a bit, and wouldn't have been nice if whatever governor you had in California at the time could put pressure on his state Senate to put pressure on the on his U.S. senator to maybe rein something like that in. That's why these checks and balances were put in, and we've kind of screwed it up through our lifetimes, but they were put in for a reason. Some very intelligent men wrote the beginnings of that Constitution, and we should kind of think about that and not be so flippant and take away some of the things that Constitution says for political expedient means.
Yeah.
I like what you guys are doing. What can we do to help?
So I would suggest, feel free to reach out to your local representatives, anyone who's listening. If you feel like you can get in touch with them and that they're going to listen, reach out to them. If you want, reach out to me or Pete. We have a Facebook page called Defend the Guard Utah. You can go there, check that out, follow it, and message us through there. If you know or you are a member of the armed forces, or you are a friend or family member, please reach out. I'd love to meet with you and hear your story. And because one thing I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the stories of anybody who's affected by this or who this bill would particularly help. I'd love to get their stories and put those out, whether it's in writing form, in video format, whatever. Just get their stories. I'm more interested in showing their faces than my face, or whatever boring piece of legislation. I want people to hear the stories. So that's the biggest thing I can think of. Pete, is there any other ideas you have?
No, that's it. Just talk to more people about this. Let people know that this movement's happening. Reach out to us so they can know when we'll be at the Capitol, and contact your legislators.
Yeah. All right. That is to go to the website. This is the national movement. It's www.defendtheguard.us. And if you want a local outreach or to get a hold of, it's Pete and David, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
I'm terrible with names, but I pulled that off. I'm quite proud of myself. I'm going to go run around the cul-de-sac. To get a hold of them, they can reach out to you through the Facebook page, Defend the Guard Utah. And if this is something you do like, get a hold of your legislature, get a hold of your representative, grab a group, see if they need help on the ground. Maybe they've got a little movement, or they need someone to bake some cookies for them.
Right. And I might add, I forgot, if you're a part of any, Rotary clubs or local political groups, parties, whatever, if you're interested, I am more than happy to come out and speak or join in through Zoom like we are. I want to talk to anybody and everybody. So if you want me to come talk about this in your local political groups or communities, just let me know. And Pete, I'm sure is just as willing, but I don't want to speak for Pete. I'll let him. So yeah, we're also happy to come meet with people.
And I'll throw this out there. I know we have county meetings every other Tuesday and city meetings. I think they're on Wednesdays, but start going to county and city to city. Find those public meetings and address yourself, address the cause.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'll start making a list and looking into that. That's a great idea.
Yep. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Thanks for what you're doing. I think it's important.
Thank you. No, appreciate your guys' time.
Yeah. And everyone, we will be back on next Friday.
Well, are we doing something tomorrow?
We're doing something. Oh, we've got the Hope for Life Foundation dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to set up a table there?
I don't know.
I don't know. We'll talk about it. Maybe we might be here tomorrow. Anyways, Pete, David, thank you very much. Thank you for your thank you for your service. You guys are, you're stepping in to help. I think in your own little way to keep the nation alive. And everyone, thanks for listening. Katie, thank you.
Yes.
We don't agree politically, but I'm going to get Katie to come on the show. Have her try to convince us. All right, you guys, have a good night.
You too. Take care.